Order. Kate Osborne to move the motion.
Thank you, Ms Butler, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. I beg to move that this House has considered the importance of Lesbian Visibility Week and believes that LGBTQIA+ women and non-binary people should be recognised for the work that they do and the joy that they bring. Lesbian Visibility Week originated in 1990 and has been given life and observed annually in the UK since 2019, enabled by my good friend and ex-publisher of Diva magazine, Linda Riley. I'm so pleased that we're here, once again acknowledging its importance here in Parliament that boasts the largest number of openly lesbian, bisexual and gay women MPs in history. Maureen Colquhoun, the first openly lesbian MP, was elected 51 years ago, but was deselected by her local party the year she came out. A stark reminder of the struggles faced by lesbian politicians. It took another 23 years for there to be another openly lesbian MP. Thankfully, there are now a lot more of us, including some of my brilliant colleagues who will be speaking here today. Lesbian and gay women face intersecting discrimination based on their gender and sexuality. And of course, people of colour and lesbians with disabilities also face unique challenges and discrimination due to intersecting identities. While it's crucial to address these challenges, it's equally important to celebrate the significant contributions lesbians make in fostering solidarity and sisterhood within their communities. Lesbian women have and will always play a pivotal role not only in supporting each other but also in leading and strengthening the broader women's and LGBT+ rights movements. For the past 5 years, we have set aside this week in April to celebrate and uplift lesbians everywhere from all backgrounds and all walks of life. And we are a community that grows stronger each and every year for it. This year, the theme is celebrating rainbow families, focusing on LGBT+ women and non-binary people's families, recognising the importance of all family structures. On Tuesday night, I was proud to host the second annual parliamentary launch of Lesbian Visibility Week. At the event, London Women's Clinic launched their new IVF Equality Manifesto. As a mum of 2 wonderful boys, one of whom was conceived through IVF, this is a subject close to my heart. Everyone deserves the chance to start a family, no matter their sexuality or gender identity. It was around 16 years ago that I started the IVF process as part of a same-sex couple. At that time, we went through unnecessary procedures, a long waiting list and significant costs. But despite the hurdles, it was achievable and my wonderful youngest son is now 14. Since the IVF journey I was part of, the hurdles LGBT plus couples have to jump through have increased, with a fragmented NHS meaning a postcode lottery in provision, and the financial cost is significantly higher. The event was attended by many MPs and guests, and I want to thank everyone who came, and I particularly want to thank the Minister for Equalities for attending and speaking and for responding to this event today, as well as Divas Linda Riley and Anya Sizer from the London Women's Clinic for their speeches. It's disappointing that despite multiple promises, there remains far too many unnecessary financial and practical barriers for same-sex couples and a postcode lottery on IVF. And I've written to the Secretary of State and ministers on this on a number of occasions, and I will keep fighting until all barriers are removed. I've dedicated most of my political career to campaigning for LGBTQIA+ equality. My first political activism was campaigning against Section 28 and highlighting the damage that it did and continues to do to our community. Section 28 was intended to silence discussion of lesbians and gays. It failed. It united and it energised our communities. I will give way.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for securing this important debate. And like her, my first political activism was campaigning against Section 28. And it's what made me join this wonderful party. And I feel truly supported by her and by my other lesbian colleagues in this place. But it was that rhetoric and those comments that our relationships and our families were somehow pretend family relationships that was so hurtful. And does she agree with me that we need to safeguard now against the risks of the rhetoric about trans people making the same sort of harm to them as it did to us in the 1980s?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and I absolutely agree, and I will be touching on some of that later in my contribution. But we know that as a community we are always stronger when we are together, and we will always have tea as part of the LGBT community. With the global attacks on our LGBT plus community, we need to find that fighting spirit again. These attacks on our community didn't just start happening again. They were driven by far-right money from America, by hate in this country and globally, from the media, and yes, politicians who should know better, continuing to demonise the LGBT plus community. Last year, I spoke about the increase to lesbophobia and that I had faced, from being called a rug muncher to being called a nonce, and having pride flags in my hometown of Hebburn ripped down. We've seen a rise in hate crime, and we must make active efforts to support our non-binary and trans community who still face unique day-to-day challenges for simply being themselves and loving who they love. Under current hate crime legislation, hate crimes based on race or religion can have a greater penalty because they are classified as aggravated offences. Our manifesto committed to ensuring that hate crime based on sexual orientation, gender identity and/or disability were also classified as aggravated offences. And I look forward to hearing from the Minister on moves for that to happen. I sit on the Council of Europe and their Equalities Committee, and part of my brief is reporting on the ban on so-called conversion practices across Europe. As part of that, I have to visit and speak to other countries about their existing legislation. One country was Italy. Outrageously, the official visit request was rejected. And I was unofficially told it's because we do not want more of your finger-wagging critique. Thankfully, the very nice Maltese government have offered us a visit instead. Just last month, as I got off a train at King's Cross, I was verbally abused by a man shouting at me that I'm obviously a lesbian, a sexual deviant, and I'm going to hell. I'm frequently misgendered, and I do not mean occasionally. It's a weekly occurrence. In January, I was misgendered 3 times in one 2-hour train journey. I've been misgendered by staff of this house, misgendered whilst buying some jeans last week. It's genuinely a frequent issue for me and a number of my lesbian friends. I note the ministers yesterday saying that there will be guidance regarding the Supreme Court verdict, but actually that decision will have a huge impact on my life and many other cis lesbians and indeed heterosexual women. I suspect I will get challenged even more now when accessing facilities. And whilst the impact on my life will be problematic, the impact on my trans siblings' lives is going to be significantly worse.
Will she give way?
I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and for securing this debate. I know that she has spoken very passionately about these issues over many decades, and I know, like me, she will have received lots of correspondence from concerned trans and LGBT plus constituents over the last few days. But does she agree with me that it's for the Labour government to get on with advancing the LGBT rights that we had in the manifesto, things like the trans-inclusive conversion therapy ban, and also modernisation of the Gender Recognition Act, and also making LGBT hate crime an aggravated offence.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and yes, I believe that only now with the Labour government will we see the continued advancements of LGBT rights, as indeed we have in the past. Whilst we're on that judgment, let me just say that that judgment doesn't offer clarity. I believe it has sown division and caused contradictions in legislation. This ruling was made without a single contribution from trans people and leaves them legally and practically at a huge disadvantage. I believe this judgment raises many more questions than answers, and I will be writing to the Secretary of State to set that out. As a woman, as a lesbian, as a feminist, as a proud dyke, the Supreme Court judgment for me is a step backwards. The court should not be telling me what a lesbian is or isn't, or how I should identify. We need empathy in finding ways to support and let everyone live their own lives. Of course, we need to protect single-sex spaces in the very limited situations that they are needed, which is and was already covered in legislation and has never been disputed, whilst maintaining clear protections for trans people, especially trans women. To see an already marginalised community attacked even more and the use of the law to increase discrimination, not prevent it, is deeply upsetting. Those celebrating the impact this decision has on trans women, curtailing their protections, should not be surprised when the same people that funded and supported their attacks then push for rights to be rolled back for all women. Research from Just Like Us clearly highlights that young lesbians are more supportive of the trans community than any other part of the LGBTQIA+ community. They are most likely to know a trans person, 92%, and most likely to say they are supportive or very supportive of trans people, 96%. I will give way.
My honourable friend for giving way, and I pay tribute to her securing this debate. I wanted particularly, in the light of what my honourable friend talks about with young lesbians, champion the work of the Schools Out organisation, which is led and founded by one of my constituents, Sue Sanders. That educates people in school about the importance of LGBT diversity, and challenges prejudice at exactly the important moment in young people's lives when they will be exploring who they may want to be as they grow older, and increases the tolerance and respect that everybody deserves.
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and I think, like in so many other ways, young people often can teach us a lesson or two, and I'm very pleased to hear her reference Sue Sanders, as I did in my speech last year, and all the great work that she's done over the years with Schools Out and indeed across the whole of our movement. Contrary to the narrative that is being heard at the moment, most heterosexual women also agree. We need to be clear that lesbophobia, homophobia and transphobia are driven by attacks from a far-right hateful minority. Feminism has to be intersectional, recognising that all women, including trans women, deserve the same rights, safety and respect. I want to thank the Minister for giving up her time today and for all her work. Having an out lesbian minister responding to a debate on Lesbian Visibility Week is something that I think we can all be very proud of. Thank you.
I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate. The question is that this House has considered Lesbian Visibility Week. Antonio Bentz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and it's an honour to serve under your chairship. Congratulations to my honourable friend and sister, the member for Jarrow and Gateshead East, on securing this debate. I am a proud trade unionist, a proud Black Country MP and a proud lesbian MP, out for 26 years and now out here in this place. So I rise to add my voice and my visibility to this debate today. Now, I could talk about the advances made by Labour governments, the advances we hope for of this Labour government, but instead I want to talk about a subject very close to my heart, and the subject of this year's Lesbian Visibility Week, being a mama. There have always been lesbian mums, and so many of us feel the urge to parent, to mother, often, sometimes in the past, sometimes today, in the face of huge homophobia and abuse, as well as practical obstacles. Indeed, a Radio 4 documentary in December, The Lesbian Mother Scandal, set out how homophobic judges removed children from their mums simply because they were lesbians, and sometimes giving the custody of those children to abusive fathers. These women, now in their 70s and 80s, they deserve an apology for the actions of the courts and the family court system, and I hope the Minister will look at giving it. A few months ago, I gave my maiden speech, and I said this, I'll say it again today. I grew up in a world where people like me couldn't get married. And now our beloved daughter has both of her mama's names on her birth certificate.
Yeah.
One of the proudest achievements of our last Labour government, but one that people sometimes don't speak of, is the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act 2008. For the first time, it recognised lesbian parents with both of our names on birth certificates, and it opened fertility treatment to us, as well as to single women. Sometimes I think it's missed from the list of the achievements of the last Labour government because it was an achievement for women in particular. I think now we have a Labour government again, it's time to take the next step for all of the lesbians that would like to have a family and make sure that we equalise fertility treatment on the NHS. It's so clear that lesbian women still face unequal barriers to accessing fertility treatment, an average cost of £25,000 before they become eligible for NHS treatment, because of the need to jump through the hurdles of self-funded IUI rounds, sometimes many self-funded IUI rounds before they qualify. Now, my own integrated care board, the Black Country ICB, requires that lesbian couples undertake 6 cycles of self-funded IUI before they are eligible for IVF. And that is in addition, of course, to the cost of donor sperm, which I know for sure is not cheap. And in my area, just 1 cycle of IVF is funded, not 3, as per the NICE guidelines. The financial impact of self-funding is absolutely huge. And for many couples, the disappointment when 1 IVF round isn't enough is completely avoidable. So I would like to see revised NICE guidelines and a commitment that every area should meet those guidelines in full. After all, this week, as well as Lesbian Visibility Week, is Infertility Awareness Week. And I wish to send my solidarity to all of those women and their partners who are trying to conceive, TTC, in the language of the message boards.
Can my honourable friend give way?
Of course.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I recently spoke to a constituent who was wanting to have a baby with her partner, and she was told by her ICB that because her partner already had a child, that she wouldn't qualify for any rounds of IVF because of her partner's situation. And looking into that, I found that that was the case in other ICBs too. And I think this needs to also be taken into account as people enter new relationships, and that is so important for our community.
My honourable friend and sister is absolutely correct. There are a load of stupid barriers that don't reflect modern families and how we form our relationships nowadays, where people do form second partnerships, where people do have existing children, and frankly, in a situation where many people are delaying childbearing and where fertility problems are on the rise, but also completely soluble by medical, in many cases soluble by medical treatment that we know very well how to do, the fact that these barriers continue to exist is absolutely outrageous. Too many women are navigating a postcode lottery and unfair rules, piling costs on their credit cards, and I know about that. Worrying about money when they should be concentrating on the medical process. Madam Chair, in this place once, books for children depicting all sorts of families were once decried as depraved, used as justification to deny that lesbian families existed, to silence us and call our families pretend. No longer. Madam Chair, Heather does have 2 mummies. So does Sam, so does Sanjay, so does Jessie, Aaron, Lily, Albie, Clementine, and so many more. Because, Madam Chair, it is love that makes a family.
Yeah. Nadia Whittam.
Thank you, Ms Butler. It's an honour to serve under your chairship. And I'd like to firstly thank my honourable friend, the member for Jarrow and Gateshead East, for securing this incredibly important debate and for her tireless work in advocating for the rights of lesbians and the entire LGBTQ plus community. I'm very glad that she's in Parliament and that I have the privilege of working with her. As an MP who is an out queer woman, I'm also grateful for the 4 mothers who made living as my true self in the public eye possible. From the countless activists who fought for and won the rights that I and we all enjoy today, to lesbian MPs like Maureen Colquhoun, a campaigner for the abolition of women's prisons, the liberalisation of abortion law and the decriminalisation of sex work, who was deselected in a homophobic campaign. And, of course, the Honourable Member for Wallasey, a key architect of the Equality Act, who I'm privileged to call my friend. Lesbian Visibility Week's mission is to recognise and celebrate LGBT plus women and non-binary people. And this year's theme is Rainbow Families. Rainbow families have always existed and they always will. But both here and internationally, queer women and non-binary people face many barriers to having the families they want. In the UK, many people are shocked to learn that we still do not have equal access to IVF, and that's despite the previous government publishing a women's health strategy in 2022 that promised to tackle it. 90% of integrated healthcare boards in England require LGBTQ plus couples to self-fund at least 6 cycles of artificial insemination before they're eligible for NHS IVF treatments. Lesbian couples should not be forced to pay for private treatment simply as a gateway to NHS care, and that's why I'm proud to back the IVF Equality Manifesto and the wider Fertility Justice Campaign Manifesto, which also campaigns for important changes to birth certificates. I think it would also be remiss of me to talk about family without emphasising the importance of chosen family in the LGBTQ plus community. Because while there are many supportive parents and family members out there who should be celebrated, a common experience within our community is rejection, hostility, and a lack of acceptance by those we're related to. And that's why chosen family is so important. And I just want to be clear that just because someone doesn't share your DNA, it doesn't mean that they are any less your family. I'm so grateful for the deep bonds that I've formed outside of the traditional family unit as well as within it. And I think actually this is something that many of us can benefit from, whether we're LGBTQ or not. Chair, visibility is something to celebrate. Every person should be able to live openly and freely, loving who they want. But sadly, many lesbians still do not feel able to do so in certain contexts. And visibility also sometimes comes with a price. Queer women are still the victims of hate crime simply for being queer women, and rates are rising. let us be clear that the overwhelming danger towards women, whether LGBTQ+ or not, comes from violent cis men. And that is why I'm deeply concerned about the impact of last week's Supreme Court judgments and the way that it's being interpreted. Making it legal to exclude trans women from bathrooms and changing rooms is discriminatory. Forcing them to use men's facilities would put them at greater risk of violence. And it also sends out a dangerous message because it enables people who see themselves as the gender police to challenge people in bathrooms, to harass them. And, of course, trans women will, above all, be the victims of this behaviour and face being driven out of society. But other people will also be affected. Cis lesbians, women of colour, non-binary people, trans men, women with conditions such as PCOS, and anyone who isn't gender non-conforming, who doesn't conform to these Eurocentric and ever-narrowing standards of femininity and womanhood, they are likely to become a target too. Incredibly, anti-trans campaigners regularly use lesbians as a justification for their agenda, an agenda which, by the way, undermines all of our rights. They claim that they're standing up for lesbians who don't want to share their spaces with trans women, when polling shows that cis lesbians and bisexual women are more supportive of trans people than any other group. They claim that trans people are forcing young cis lesbians to become trans men. This is the same as what was said about gay people under Thatcher, that we were converting children. Today, thankfully, most of society accepts that that's absolute nonsense, and there are more young women than ever before identifying as lesbian and bisexual. And we should be pleased that people feel able to be their true selves. But it also puts to bed the lie that young lesbians are being forced to become trans men. Finally, I just want to make the point that it's important to remember that many of the rights of queer people, that many of the rights that queer people have now are relatively recent. The last Labour government is often remembered as a time for progress for LGBTQ+ people, quite rightly. But just as rights can be won, they can also be lost. And this Labour government risks being remembered as a period when things went backwards for our community. We've only been in government for less than a year. It's possible to turn the ship around, but we must recognise that actions like the blanket ban on puberty blockers and barring trans women from women's spaces are dangerous steps in the wrong direction, and take action to remedy them. Thank you.
I'm very mindful that we have a vote coming up shortly, so may stop you mid-speech, Liv Bailey.
No problem. Thank you very much, Ms Butler. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and thank you also to my honourable friend, the member for Jarrow and Gateshead East, for holding this debate. She is a fantastic champion of our community, and I thank her for all that she does. It is a wonderful privilege to speak in this debate today as a proud lesbian MP. I am an historian by trade, and in particular I enjoy learning about the social history of our country, of the everyday people who organised and agitated and persisted to deliver the enormous social change that we have witnessed over the last few centuries. But it has always struck me that there was something not quite right about the books that I've pored over, and that is that lesbians are completely missing. Exactly. Women who we might look back on now and suggest may have been lesbians or LGBTQ+, brushed past, pages of unwritten sentences, of unheard stories. In the words of the historian Rebecca Jennings, lesbian history has frequently been associated with silence, invisibility, and denial. And in Rebecca Jennings' excellent book, A Lesbian History of Britain, there are many examples of which I will draw on today. Throughout our history, lesbians have been forced to hide their love and their relationships out of fear, and it is no surprise that so few records exist. But I will admit to being somewhat surprised by the pains that historians have gone to explain away what does seem quite obvious. Two women in the late 1700s who eloped to Wales, shared a bed and addressed each other as my beloved in their correspondence, described by historians as having a romantic friendship, but not one that was intimate. Now, I don't dispute the power of a friendship between women, but that does seem a stretch, Chair. The discovery of Anne Lister's diaries in the 1980s that had been carefully written in an ancient Greek code were a turning point. She had the courage to document her relationships with women, and the discovery of her diaries has shattered this historical conspiracy to erase us. And so now, when I think about the women who, throughout our history, who might now be stood proudly with us as lesbians, but who then did not have the power that we do of rights, of an identity, of a community, I think that the most important thing that we can do is tell our stories and is be proud of who we are, because we must never underestimate the power of being seen. The theme of Lesbian Visibility Week this year is rainbow families, and it is fantastic to celebrate all of the families with LGBTQ+ parents. I know from my own experience of adopting my children that there is absolutely nothing more precious than having the opportunity to be a mum. My boys are the best thing that will ever happen to me, and growing up, I could never have imagined the possibility of being a mum. But being a family that turns heads isn't always easy. I should not have had to hurry my family away from aggressive shouting in the street. I should not have to monitor every turned head in the street to see if I'm going to be met with a smile or a frown. It should not feel like every time I hold hands with my wife at the school gate that I'm staging my own small act of rebellion.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I would simply ask her to consider, in the context of her experience as a lesbian mother, again, the experience of those lesbian mothers in the 70s and 80s that my honourable friend from Tipton and Wednesbury mentioned. Does my honourable friend agree with me, and indeed with my honourable friend from Tipton and Wednesbury, that there is an argument now for an apology for those mothers, because they experienced not just shouting in the street, but institutional attacks on their rights to family life as a result of not actually the law, but the prejudice of the courts?
Absolutely, Anna. Thank you very much indeed for that intervention. So to conclude, I am very proud to be an out lesbian MP. I am prouder than words can describe of my family. And with the privilege of the position that I have in this place, I will do my best to be seen, to be myself, because that is the best way to honour those who have come before us, and the best way to ensure that for those who come after, being a lesbian, being LGBTQ+, being a rainbow family, is finally non-remarkable. And that when the historians pen the books about our small window of time, our whole lives are not just documented, but can be read about without a single sign of shame or controversy, because we deserve nothing less.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the front benches for wind-ups. Sarah Dyke.
Thank you, Ms Butler. It's a pleasure to serve with you and the Chair, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for Jarrow and Gateshead East for securing this vital debate and for her excellent speech. And it's so wonderful to hear from so many sisters across the House. Lesbian visibility matters. It matters because representation brings understanding, and understanding brings change. Today, I want to talk about the inequalities that lesbians still face, the value of community and safe spaces, and what we as legislators can do to ensure lesbians are not just seen, but heard, respected, and supported. But, Ms. Butler, before I do, I wanted to take a moment to celebrate a woman who spent her life working for lesbian rights and visibility. I was delighted to learn that earlier this year, Voltaire and the London LGBT+ Forums Network unveiled a rainbow plaque honouring the inspirational Jackie Foster. outside her former London home. Now, it was said after her death that if she had served a cause other than lesbian rights, she'd have been festooned with honours. She would have been called Dame Jackie Forster. So courageous was she that in 1969 she came out by announcing to the world at Speaker's Corner, "You are looking at a roaring dyke." A name I often get called. Jackie was daring and unapologetic, and we must ensure that her fortitude and her legacy continues. Jackie spearheaded the launch of the triumphant and bold 1970s lesbian magazine Sappho, a publication that reached out to women suffering crippling isolation in a time where the pressure of heterosexual compliance was high. At the time, Sappho created a much-needed safe forum that allowed women to realise that they were not freakish outcasts or mentally unwell. They were lesbians, and there were many other women like them. But 50 years on, in 2023, the University College London published a sobering study showing that LGBT individuals are 3 times more likely to self-harm and twice as likely to experience suicidal thoughts compared to heterosexual people. Within this group, lesbians face specific and significant mental health challenges, ranging from increased rates of depression to internalised self-hate. These challenges are even more pronounced among those who have not felt able to disclose their sexual orientation. Ms Butler, the mental health inequalities lesbians face stem in large part from what has been called minority stress.
Order, order. The sitting is suspended for 15 minutes for a division in the House, or 25 minutes if 2 divisions are expected. Order. Order, order. The sitting is resumed. The debate may now continue until 3:25. We will go back to the Lib Dem spokesperson, Sarah Dyke.
Ms Butler. Now, as I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted by the division bell. The mental health inequalities lesbians face stem in large part from what has been called minority stress. That is, the strain of navigating a world that too often marginalises or misunderstands them. Internalised stigma, fear of rejection, and the emotional toll of either concealing or repeatedly disclosing one's identity all contribute. But there is a powerful antidote: community, a sense of belonging, support from others who understand. That's why lesbian spaces matter. Lesbian bars, clubs and social venues have long provided a sanctuary, a space to be oneself, free from judgment or hypersexualisation, free from the male gaze or a society that doesn't always understand. Yet in many parts of the UK and across the West, lesbian venues are vanishing. The 1990s saw a surge of women-only spaces in London, like First Out, the Candy Bar, Vespers, Glass Bar, Due South and Oak Bar, many of which I frequented myself. But sadly, they all closed by 2015. And in Amsterdam, a city long seen as a beacon of LGBT plus inclusion, one of the last lesbian bars, Aviv Lviv, closed in 2017 after nearly 4 decades. Now, a recent survey of over 500 lesbians showed that 96% of them were concerned about the loss of lesbian spaces and community groups. This must act as a wake-up call. We need better research into this decline and greater innovation in how we support and preserve lesbian-only spaces and communities, both physical and digital. We must also address how media, particularly online pornography, contributes to the damaging stereotyping of lesbians. Lesbian porn is consistently among the most searched categories on mainstream sites, yet the portrayals are not reflective of reality. Instead, they are often harmful, degrading, and distort how lesbians are perceived by others and, worse still, by themselves. Increasingly, young same-sex attracted women are distancing themselves from the term lesbian due to its association with those harmful tropes. Our education system must respond. It is essential that we reform relationships and sex education, not to only protect children from the harms of online pornography, but also to challenge these stereotypes and promote positive, diverse lesbian role models. Because every child deserves to see someone like them reflected in the world around them. Now, Ms Butler, internationally, we must not turn a blind eye. In many countries, same-sex attraction remains a criminal offence, and in some cases, lesbians face abhorrent violence. The 2008 brutal gang rape and murder of South African footballer Yudi Simelane shone a light on the horror of so-called corrective rape, a hate crime that's still reported around the world, especially in the global south. The UK must be a leader in global human rights, pushing for decriminalisation and protection for same-sex attracted people around the world. Another area that lesbian communities face different challenges is when they begin to consider starting a family. All LGBTQ+ people deserve equitable access to the reproductive healthcare services they need. But inequalities persist and must be addressed urgently. Only 3 out of the 42 ICBs in England give female same-sex couples access to fertility funding, while others give access to funding to women who have not conceived after 2 years of unprotected intercourse, or 6 to 12 self-funded rounds of artificial insemination. This is clearly discriminatory. One cycle of IVF costing, say, about £5,000 or more. So some women will need to find in excess of £30,000 to start a family. So some, so desperate to start their family, are forced to seek alternative, often dangerous routes whereby they put themselves physically, psychologically and legally at risk. And as always, the costs of those risks far, far outweigh the cost of their fertility treatment. So the Liberal Democrats will push for an integrated care body to make sure that this change is a priority, to ensure that equitable access to IVF is available for all lesbian couples who are looking to start their own families. Ms Butler, let me end on a note of hope. The British Social Attitude Survey shows our country has become significantly more open and accepting. In 1983, 17% of people believed that same-sex relationships were not wrong at all. In 2023, that figure stood at 67%. And those who say same-sex relationships are always wrong has plummeted from 50% to just 9%. This progress matters. It helps to make people feel safer, more accepted, more empowered to live openly and authentically. Now, as Liberal Democrats, we believe in a freer, fairer and more compassionate society. That includes recognising and uplifting lesbian voices, protecting lesbian culture and ensuring that everybody, especially those who are most marginalised within our communities, feel safe, supported and seen. Thank you.
Thank you. The opposition spokesperson, Mims Davis.
Thank you, Ms Butler. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I would like to thank the Honourable Member for Jarrow and Gateshead East for securing this debate and for all members for adding their important contributions today. And it is always a pleasure to speak on behalf of His Majesty's loyal opposition. Today has been a real celebration of the role of lesbians in our society, the contribution we can all make irrespective of who we are and who we love. And that should be no different for whomever we may be. And I'm very proud of our party's action on civil partnerships and equal marriage. And it's very important to recognise around 1.2% of women identify as lesbian, and the Honourable Member for Jarrow was with her uncle just last night in East Grinstead as we celebrated Rotary's 39th birthday, and I know she, like he, we have different views on politics, but representation for all is something we very much agree on. So it's a pleasure to speak in this debate, and it's a pleasure to speak opposite the Honourable Lady opposite from Llanelli, who is the Parliamentary Under-Secretary for Equalities, who has shared her sexuality, been open for many years and added real value to this House since 2016 and sharing this personal journey. And that's what's so amazing about being in this House, is that we can share our personal journeys, our friends, our family and what makes us, and that makes the richness of this debate. I'd like to take a moment to celebrate some colleagues of mine who've done exactly this by bringing their contributions into politics from my party. At the very top of Cabinet, Conservative Justine Greening, who became the first lesbian Cabinet Minister in 2016. As she memorably put it, "I campaigned for stronger in, but sometimes you're far better out." Movingly, she said afterwards, "It really struck me in my constituency how many parents wrote to me saying thank you because it made it easier for my child at school." And as many others have said, having visible role models is so vital. Many women today are visible role models, making it easier for people to discover their true selves, which is what this week is really about. And having come so far across wider society, it's astounding that it took my former colleague, Margot James, the former Conservative MP for Stourbridge, who was the first out Conservative lesbian, but also to be first to be out prior her election back in 2010, and I'm pleased to see many others across this House continuing to come forward and being proudly who they are. And it was in 2011 that the Scottish Conservatives elected the very first openly gay or lesbian leader of a mainstream political party, with the magnificent Ruth Davidson. As a proud unionist, the debt owed to Ruth for keeping nationalism at bay and Scotland's precious place in our union, for me, is hard to understate. I notice former colleagues in the room today who may feel differently, but in terms of being proudly who they are, I'm sure that's something that unites. And I'm very proud to continue to have the voice of Scotland in this place for our party or otherwise. Now, today in the Shadow Equalities team, we are ably supported by the very first out peer, Baroness Stedman Scott, whose contribution as a minister in various departments, working with me, not least in our shared work in DWP, was second to none. So I do apologise for a slightly backwards glance, but I'm very conscious that I'm very much on my own here today. So I was proud to be part of a government not just working alongside inspirational women that I've mentioned, but really working with them in terms of policies. And in terms of people that you can see out and proud, author Jacqueline Wilson, TV presenters Sue Perkins, Sandy Toksvig and the wonderful Claire Balding. It's brilliant for us to see on our screens lesbian women out and proud. The Honourable Lady, she's not in her place at the moment, from East Thanet, spoke about guidance and help for young girls, and that is very much needed, and I enjoyed her welcome contributions. And the Honourable Lady from Reading West spoke about the historic gaps, which I thought was very, very powerful, and of course again about the power of being seen and the challenge of being a visible lesbian mother, and I thank her for sharing that today. This year's theme, as we've heard from the Honourable Lady who opened the debate, is rainbow families. And as a single parent, a straight woman, but a single parent who quite often feels that people judge the shape of my family, I do understand that. This year's theme, of course, of Lesbian Visibility Day on access to fertility care was something which was actively being worked on under the previous Conservative government through the Women's Health Strategy, removing barriers and requirements to prove infertility before access to IVF treatment. And the former MP for the Lewis area, which I now partially represent, and the Health Minister at the time, Maria Caulfield, helped announce regulations that came into effect last November, importantly scrapping various tests for reciprocal IVF, which potentially added an additional £1,000 to the cost of this treatment course. And that, of course, cost has been raised today. And, of course, the Women's Health Strategy, we know, is, as far as I can see, somewhat scrapped, and perhaps the Honourable Lady can confirm where the Labour government is on this and assure the House today that work is continuing in this area. It was actually touched on by the Honourable Member for Nottingham East, asking for clarity around the Women's Health Strategy, and on that we absolutely agree. I also look forward to the revised NICE guidance in this regard. Removing barriers to IVF is important, but as we've heard today, it's only one route for family formation. 1 in 5 children are adopted by LGBT+ parents. And it is remarkable to think when changes in the law were so recent that we've come so far, and we see the amazing contribution that having a child in the right loving home, the difference it can make, and that is truly wonderful to see. So I hope the Minister can use her good offices to push her government in regard to the Women's Health Strategy. The modern iteration of Lesbian Visibility Week itself is quite new, as the Honourable Member for Jarrow said in opening this debate, with the modern iteration in 2020. And now it's given to be understood the dare I say, newly understood ambiguities in the Equality Act and elsewhere. It was no surprise that last year's debate got somewhat heated, I think we can probably remember, and entangled around biological sex. For many women, a lesbian, of course, a same-sex attracted biological woman should not feel the need for that identity to be subsumed amongst other identities. And I think all of us in this chamber today can be very clear that we support others and how they identify, and that is perfectly valid, and it's important to not allow this to continue to be toxic or hateful, and for any lesbian to feel that they need to identify in any other way. Indeed, these points were made by organisations and submissions to the court ahead of this landmark ruling from just this week we've been discussing, and I'm thinking particularly of the Scottish Lesbians and the Lesbians project, which allows me to talk about the importance of Kate Harris and, of course, the LGB Alliance, as she, of course, was moved very greatly by having to defend the very definition of what a lesbian is in court. And I had the pleasure of chatting to her not that long ago as we celebrated the Equality Act at that event. And it's been reported in the media most recently that lesbian-owned spaces have been forced underground or indeed cancelled entirely for those people, those women wishing to stick to this view. And the Honourable Lady from the Liberal Democrats has spoken particularly about that. They all sound marvellous, those places, I must say. Now, as the official opposition, we roundly welcome, and it's been clear this week, the Supreme Court's recent ruling, which has given much needed clarity on the Equality Act, which will rightly allow lesbian-only spaces the chance to be free from intimidation and threats of cancellation, and that's been very evident today in this afternoon's debate. And we, of course, now await guidance from the various bodies directed by the Labour government, and perhaps maybe the Minister will be saying more about this, which hopefully, as the Secretary of State has promised, will be produced at pace. And I hope it really does give that clarity under the law and that clarity in practice, which is exactly what this debate is about today. Our communities, our opportunities as women, as lesbian women, as any women, must be fair, equal and safe. That women's rights and freedoms cannot and must not be eroded, but celebrated and protected, particularly as we approach the 100th anniversary of universal suffrage. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Dame Near Griffith.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and it's an immense pleasure to see you there in the chair. You've always been a fantastic ally of the lesbian community and indeed the LGBT plus community. I'd obviously like to start by thanking my honourable friend, the member for Jarrow and East Gateshead, for organising us all to be here today and to stay on a Thursday afternoon to debate this very important topic, and for the other events that she's been instrumental in organising for this Lesbian Visibility Week. And again, she has an amazing track record. She never looks old enough. She might be misaged, I think, sometimes, to have been around to fight on the Clause 28 issues. And of course she did, but more recently she's known for her campaigning on equal access to help with fertility. She's reminded us again of our commitment to ensure that hate crime becomes an aggravated offence in the case of LGBT hate crime, and also that we go forward with our ban on conversion practices. Now, Ms Butler, to be seen, known and accepted for who we are truly is not just a privilege, it's a fundamental human need. Yet not so long ago, women who did not fit into the expectations of traditional family life were denied that need. To be a lesbian or bisexual woman was to face the choice of conformity or to risk isolation, discrimination and violence. We were told we weren't real women, that it was just a phase, while simultaneously experiencing sexualisation by male-dominated media. And that was when we were seen at all. even at the height of the homophobic panic of the 80s and 90s press, we were largely erased with the focus on gay and bisexual men as the true threat, and our opponents often sought to erase or trivialise us in spite, of course, of the tremendous solidarity that many lesbians actually showed to their LGBT allies and friends. And I'd just like to pay tribute to some of the other comments made by colleagues today and some of the issues that they have raised. My honourable friend for Tipton and Wednesbury set out the cases of the women whose children were taken from them by court judgments, no doubt influenced by the prejudices of the time, and I will certainly take back her request in respect of an apology on that particular issue. She also highlighted the importance of the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Bill passed in 2008 by the then Labour government in terms of recognising lesbians. And then my honourable friend from Reading, West and Mid Berkshire, referred to the ladies of Llangollen, but I note she carefully avoided saying Llangollen. But the point is serious, that actually, if you read through the history books, you know, lesbians are invisible, and that's why this idea of Visibility Week, I think, is so powerful. My honourable friend from North Warwickshire and Bedworth, again, emphasised the discrimination that families can face, particularly, she was referring to perhaps the second family being started, and the sort of questioning and the refusal of fertility treatment that then ensued. My honourable friend for Nottingham East made a very impassioned speech, really putting on the record how absolutely horrific, uncalled for, unjustified is the prejudice that we have seen against trans women, and making it very clear that the violence that women, and indeed trans women, experience is 99.9% from cis men. Then my honourable friend for East Thanet mentioned the importance of LGBT plus inclusive education, how very important that is to be both supportive to those students who feel they may want to question their identity, but also for a greater and broader understanding by everyone in society, of all of us in society. The Lib Dem spokeswoman spoke very powerfully of Jackie Forster back in 1969, flying the flag for lesbians at a time when it really was very difficult, but reminded us that 50 years on, the mental health challenges faced by lesbians are significantly greater than those by the population in general, and referred to the horrors of the very harmful, degrading portrayal of lesbians on the internet, as well, of course, as making the case, again, for greater equality and access to fertility treatments. And the opposition spokeswoman spoke very eloquently of her former colleagues, Justine Greening, Margot James, Ruth Davidson, and her current colleague, Baroness Edwin Scott. And she's asking about the Women's Health Strategy. Well, I can assure you that we are continuing our work with NHS England and the Women's Health Ambassador to implement the Women's Health Strategy. So if I may move on then, that it's really important, I think, as many members have done, to remember those who did come before us. And for me, the late member for Northampton North, Maureen Cahoon, is an integral part of the story of lesbian women in this country and in this Parliament. Maureen was a woman ahead of her time. In 1973, whilst Labour MP for Northampton North, Maureen took the impossibly brave step of coming out of the closet. The scale of hatred, fear and ridicule that fell upon her is hard to imagine, and yet in 1974 she achieved re-election with a larger majority. However, the pervasive ignorance and discrimination that defined attitudes to homosexuality at the time could not be overcome. Her sexuality and her commitment to women's rights saw her own constituency party deselect her, and she did not return to Parliament after the 1979 election. In a time when hostility was the norm and lesbian role models almost non-existent, her refusal to be erased is nothing short of heroic, and I'm proud to remember her in this debate today. Ms Butler, today the visibility of lesbian and bisexual women is greater than ever. Whether it be singers, sports heroes or fictional couples, young women in our community have more visibility and role models than before. And yet, despite this progress, compared to the media exposure and visibility of gay and bisexual men, we still lag behind and we're still subject to clichés and ignorance. That's why it's so important that people like Linda Riley, founder of Lesbian Visibility Week, have sought to address this imbalance. By providing a platform for lesbian women to celebrate their achievements and share their experiences, Linda has really helped countless people to feel part of a community. And as we continue to work towards meaningful visibility and equality, it's also essential that we have legal clarity around the rights of women, including lesbian women, to single-sex spaces and services. Last week's ruling by the Supreme Court judgment in the case of Women Scotland versus the Scottish Ministers confirms that the definition of woman in the Equality Act 2010 refers to biological sex. But I also want to highlight the remarks made by the Minister for Women and Equalities last week to provide reassurance following the Supreme Court's ruling that trans people will also continue to be protected. This government is clear: trans people deserve safety, they deserve opportunity, they deserve respect. There remain protections in place for trans people to live free from discrimination, harassment and have their acquired gender recognised. Trans people will still be protected on the basis of gender reassignment, a protected characteristic. Lesbian women have always stood in solidarity with gay men and trans people, from the front lines of the HIV/AIDS epidemic to today's shared struggles for equality. I strongly recommend and encourage this unwavering allyship at this time of uncertainty for many within the LGBT+ community. Now, Ms Butler, just as previous Labour governments have driven forward equality, this Labour government is no different. We will reverse the backsliding and the politics of division that unfortunately we saw under the previous government, though I do not include the front bench spokeswoman in my comments there. And we will certainly push progress forward once more for the entire LGBT+ community. Take, for example, conversion practices. Recently, I was very privileged to visit Gallup, who operate the government-funded victim support service for people who have or are in danger of experiencing conversion practices. Here I heard the deeply troubling experiences of young people subjected to such abusive practices and was reminded of very real attempts to not just erase our community, but delegitimise our existence. The government's clear: conversion practices are abuse, they do not work and inflict deep and lasting harm on victims. That such acts continue to occur in our society, a society largely accepting of LGBT+ people as valid, demeans us all. The previous government failed to act, this government will not. That's why we have committed to publishing a draft legislation in this King's Speech to introduce a fully trans-inclusive ban on conversion practices. Of course, any ban must be carefully designed to ensure it does not inadvertently criminalise legitimate psychological support or non-directive counselling or supporting those who are exploring their sexual orientation or gender identity. We're also working to strengthen legal protections for lesbians. That's why we're working with the Home Office to equalise all hate crime strands, ensuring that lesbians and indeed the entire LGBT+ community receive the same protections under the law as other groups targeted by hate. Equality must mean more than just words. It must mean action to protect the most vulnerable in our community. We know that LGBT+ people are disproportionately affected by homelessness compared to their heterosexual peers. Some studies suggest that as many as 1 in 5 LGBT+ people have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives, and women are particularly vulnerable to the difficult and often dangerous reality faced by those without a home. This government is committed to tackling all forms of homelessness, including LGBT+ homelessness. That's why we will establish a dedicated interministerial group chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister to bring together ministers from across government to develop a long-term strategy to end homelessness for good. Ms Butler, while visibility has grown and some barriers have fallen, lesbians still face unacceptable disparities in health and well-being. According to the Government Equalities Office, lesbian women are more likely to report long-term mental health issues than their heterosexual peers. Many report avoiding healthcare altogether. due to fear of discrimination or previous poor treatment. Lesbian women are also less likely to attend cervical screening appointments, in part due to outdated assumptions and dangerous misconceptions that they're not at risk. And too many lesbians still face invasive questioning and unequal treatment when engaging with the healthcare system. Health should not be determined by sexuality. That's why this government is committed to closing the health gap. We will work with public health bodies to ensure that lesbian women are no longer invisible in data or ignored in care. Now, as we know, the theme of this year's Lesbian Visibility Week is that of rainbow families. Back in 2002, the previous Labour government introduced the Adoption and Children Act, which allowed same-sex couples to adopt for the first time. This momentous legislation has seen thousands of children find loving homes in which to grow up and afforded to many LGBT+ people the joys and challenges of parenthood. I recently had the honour of being at the reception hosted by DIVA and the London's Women's Clinic at the launch of their latest IVF manifesto, and I've also participated in an event with Stonewall this week, on including the launch of their family formation guide, or rather the presentation of that guide. Parenthood is for so many a very, very significant journey, the most significant journey they will ever embark on. Yet for too many lesbian and bisexual women, their journeys to motherhood are still complicated by ignorance and practical obstacles, including problems accessing NHS fertility treatment. Now, whilst we've made great strides in assisted reproductive technologies, including IVF and IUI, we must now ensure equal access to these treatments by removing unnecessary obstacles and advocate for a health service that treats all users with respect and dignity. Ensuring that LGBT+ people feel welcomed in the health service is a key pillar to what this government stands for. For too long, LGBT+ women have been priced out of having a family through fertility treatments, with NHS provision depending on the luxury of a postcode in the right area. This government is ambitious to address these inequalities as part of our new health mission and through our commitments to make the health service work for its users. Last year, the government finalised legislation that removed the additional screening costs that same-sex couples face when undertaking shared motherhood simply for being an LGBT+ couple. Removing unnecessary burdens like excess fees is extremely important in paving the way for full IVF equality. Furthermore, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence are currently reviewing their fertility guidelines, which aim to reduce variation in practice and improve the way that fertility problems are managed. We're expecting this to be published towards the end of this year and encourage integrated care boards to improve their offer to fertility patients in anticipation of and after receiving the new guidelines. And finally, I want to take the opportunity to emphasise this government's commitment to equality beyond our borders. We are proud to defend LGBT+ rights worldwide, and as members of the Equal Rights Coalition, we stand alongside those fighting for freedom in countries where being LGBT+ is still a crime. Our global LGBT+ rights programme is helping improve political, social and economic empowerment by addressing outdated discriminatory laws, promoting protective legislation, enabling local civil society organisations and supporting the most LGBT+ people in vulnerable conflict and crisis. Ms Butler, we've come a long way from the days of Maureen Cahoon's lone voice. Today, 1 in 10 members of this House of Commons identifies as LGBT+, more than in any other parliament in the world. And yet that progress is threatened by renewed calls as to the legitimacy of our lives and our rights, threatened by inequalities still faced by lesbians when compared to their heterosexual peers, across physical and mental health, secure housing, and lack of protection from deeply traumatic conversion practices and hate crimes. In such times, we should look to the likes of Maureen Cahoon and Linda Riley for inspiration. When the world tried to hide us, to vilify us, they stood up. Because for progress to be realised, we must not hide, we must not retreat. We must be seen and heard and answer the politics of division with unity.
Thank you. Nice to see so many members turn up for the wind-ups. 2 minutes, Kate Osborne, to wind up.
Thank you. can I first of all thank all who spoke here, who ensured that they did so with respect and care. I want to thank the Honourable Member from Tipton and Wednesbury for sharing her proud lesbian mama status and for her commitment to fight for equal access to IVF and highlighting the local impact of the postcode lottery infertility treatment. And I'm sure we'll continue to fight that together in this place. I don't have time to thank everybody as much as I would like to, but I'd like to thank those from the opposition benches, in particular the Right Honourable Member for Glastonbury and Somerset, for highlighting the legend and legacy of Jackie Foster and her contribution on global hate crime and the stress that our communities face. Somehow we've never bumped into each other in any of those bars that you mentioned. We must try harder to do that. And she's quite right, we need more lesbian bars and lesbian spaces. I'd like to thank the Opposition Minister for her words. My Uncle Frank and my dad will be absolutely delighted that she mentioned them today. He wants recognition for his 50 years as a councillor, and I hope that this goes some way to doing that. I agree that we will all be looking very closely at the NICE guidelines when they're brought forward. This debate has indeed been a lot less heated, which is to be welcomed, and I hope that continues going forward and politicians of all stripes stop using our community as a political football. Can I thank the Minister for all the work that she has and continues to do, for her kind words and for her commitment to take away the many asks from this debate. Can I thank you, Ms Butler, for your expert chairmanship, and I hope to be here in front of you another time in the future. By our visibility and contributions today, we give hope and encouragement to lesbians who are not yet in a position to be out and proud, or who are at the start of their journey. Our hard-fought rights are under attack, and we must defend them. I want to end by wishing all lesbians who work in this House and all lesbians globally a very happy Lesbian Visibility Week. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that this House has considered Lesbian Visibility Week. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Thank you. Order, order.